Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's so nice. A lot of spirit. Great spirit for this country. Thank you all. We have tremendous spirit, and I want to thank you. We had a wonderful election, didn't we? And I saw those numbers. And you like me, and I like you. That's the way it worked. I'm honored to be here today among so many of our really and truly great heroes. I want to begin by thanking General Votel and General Thomas for their distinguished leadership and service on behalf of our country. Very, very outstanding people. I'd also like to thank General Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's big stuff when you have the chairman. Where is it? Joe, stand up for a second. This is one of the great people. Thank you. Also, Commander Vogel and everyone serving at MacDill Air Force Base. Quite a place. And we're going to be loading it up with beautiful new planes and beautiful new equipment. You've been lacking a little equipment. We're going to load it up. You're going to get a lot of equipment. Believe me. So importantly, also, let me thank all of the coalition partners and their representatives assembled here today. We proudly, very proudly, stand with you, and we will be fighting for your security. They're fighting for our security and freedom. Let me recognize our great governor and a very good friend of mine, and somebody who endorsed me. That makes him a better friend of mine. You know, if they don't endorse, believe me, if you're ever in this position, it's never quite the same, okay? You can talk, but it never means the same. But this man is a great, great governor and has done a fantastic job. Rick Scott, Governor, stand up, please. Thank you, Rick. Finally, on behalf of the entire nation, let me express our gratitude to all members, and I mean all members, of our military serving in the United States Central Command and the United States Special Operations Command. We salute the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard, along with our civilian defense personnel who are so important to the success of what we're doing. Let me also recognize the military families and spouses who bravely shoulder the burdens of war. I want every military family in this country to know that our administration is at your service. We stand with you 100%. We will protect those who protect us, and we will never, ever let you down. As your president, I have no higher duty than to protect the American people. Highest duty we have. I said it the other night. Great, great Supreme Court nominee. You all saw that. But I said to myself, perhaps the only thing more important to me definitely is the defense of our nation. Supreme Court's so important, but we have to defend our nation. And we will do that, believe me. We will do that. And each and every one of you is central to that mission. The men and women serving in CENTCOM and SOCOM have poured out their hearts and souls for this country. They've really experienced things that very few people get to experience. You've shed your blood across the continents and the oceans. You've engaged the enemy on distant battlefields, toiled in the burning heat and bitter cold, and sacrificed everything so that we can remain safe and strong and free. Our administration will always honor our sacred bond to those who serve, and we will never, ever forget you. Believe me, we will never, ever forget you. We will ensure that the men and women of our military have the tools, equipment, resources, training, and supplies you need to get the job done. You've seen me say we've been depleted. Our Navy is at a point almost as low as World War I. It's a long time ago. It's a long time ago. It's not going to happen anymore, folks. It's not going to happen anymore. Not with me. But we will ensure no taxpayer dollars are wasted. I have already saved more than $700 million when I got involved in the negotiation on the F-35. You know about that. And I want to thank Lockheed Martin, and I want to thank Boeing, and I want to thank all of the companies that have really opened up. And when I say opened up, Rick Scott understands this very well, opened up and cut their prices, okay? Because that's what they did. And we've got that program. It's going to be back in really great shape from really being very troubled. And we are going to be taking care of our great veterans. We will make a historic financial investment in the armed forces of the United States and show the entire world that America stands with those who stand in defense of freedom. We have your back every hour, every day, now and always. That also means getting our allies to pay their fair share. It's been very unfair to us. We strongly support NATO. We only ask that all of the NATO members make their full and proper financial contributions to the NATO alliance, which many of them have not been doing. Many of them have not been even close, and they have to do that. Central Command and Central Operations Command are at the very center of our fight against radical Islamic terrorism. America stands in awe of your courage. Those serving at CENTCOM have bravely fought across the theater of war in the Middle East and bravely battled a vicious enemy that has no respect for human life. Today, we express our gratitude to everyone serving overseas, including all of our military personnel in Afghanistan. SOCOM has dispatched its legendary warriors to the most secret, sensitive, and daring missions in defense of the United States of America. No enemy stands a chance against our special forces. Not even a chance. They don't have a chance. And that's the way we're going to keep it. And you're going to be better off because you're going to have the finest equipment known to man. Going to be better off. The proof that our nation has been blessed by God, look no further than the men and women of the United States military. They are the greatest fighters and the greatest force of justice on the face of the earth and that the world has ever known. The challenges facing our nation, nevertheless, are very large, very, very large. We're up against an enemy that celebrates death and totally worships destruction. You've seen that. ISIS is on a campaign of genocide, committing atrocities across the world. Radical Islamic terrorists are determined to strike our homeland, as they did on 9/11, as they did from Boston to Orlando to San Bernardino, and all across Europe. You've seen what happened in Paris and Nice. All over Europe, it's happening. It's gotten to a point where it's not even being reported. And in many cases, the very, very dishonest press doesn't want to report it. They have their reasons, and you understand that. So today we deliver a message in one very unified voice to these forces of death and destruction. America and its allies will defeat you. We will defeat them. We will defeat radical Islamic terrorism, and we will not allow it to take root in our country. We're not going to allow it. You've been seeing what's been going on over the last few days. We need strong programs so that people that love us and want to love our country and will end up loving our country are allowed in. Not people that want to destroy us and destroy our country. Thank you. Freedom, security, and justice will prevail. In his first State of the Union message, President George Washington wrote that to be prepared for war is one of the most effectual means of preserving peace. Almost 200 years later, as the general was also speaking about Ronald Reagan, he said that wisdom comes in three very, very strong words: peace through strength. I've said it many times during the campaign, speaking in front of tens of thousands of people at one sitting, and I'd always mention America first, a phrase that you probably never heard: make America great again. Anybody ever heard that? And peace through strength. The men and women of the United States military provide the strength to bring peace to our troubled times. We stand behind you. We support your mission. We love our country. We are loyal to our people. We respect our flag. We celebrate our traditions. We honor our heroes. You are our heroes. And we are prepared to fight. And we pray for peace. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
And that was President Trump just speaking at the MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. We want to get you a recap of the headlines and an overview of what else the president discussed in his comments. Let's go now to Bloomberg's Tolu Olorunnipa, who is reporting from the White House. The president spoke a little bit late because he was actually scheduled to begin speaking at 1 p.m. First of all, set the scene for us. Who was the main audience here? Because he touched on a number of different areas.
Yeah, the president wanted to voice his support for the armed services, the various service members who are fighting on a number of different fronts, but he also wanted to speak to the American people and those who are his opponents who have spoken out against his immigration ban. He's basically said that the United States needs strong programs to decide who can come into the country and who needs to be kept out. He wanted to allow the American people to know that the reason that he put into place this immigration ban, in his words, is because he wanted to protect the national security of the United States. So this scene was part of that message. It's an ongoing fight in the courts, but he wants to win the battle of the battle over public opinion, saying that the reason that he's put in this immigration ban is because he wants to protect the United States.
Tolu, as he continues to obviously fight that legal battle, and as it builds, is that really the sort of talking point we can continue to expect to hear from him and his administration, that, hey, at the end of the day, this is very much about security of the United States, this is very much about protection?
Yeah, definitely. If you look at the tweets that the president put out over the weekend, he took very direct shots at the judge that lifted that basically put a restraining order on this immigration ban, saying that this judge is going to be responsible for whatever bad things happen. He said that bad people are going to pour into the country because this immigration ban has been put on hold. So basically, he's painted a picture of a very dark and very dangerous country where different people are trying to come into the country, and he's acting to try to stop it with this immigration ban on 7 Muslim-majority countries. So that's an argument that we're expecting to hear from him going forward, that he's protecting the United States and he's going to do what he can, even though the courts, as he says, are standing in his way.
Tolu, what did he say about NATO? Because on the one hand, while he did indicate he supported, the U.S. supports NATO, he also added some conditions, it appeared.
Yeah, that's the other argument. This was a statement that was not only to the American people and the people in the audience, but also to the world and not some of our allies in NATO. He said that he does not believe that that the NATO countries are all paying their fair share. He says that something he said on the campaign trail, that the United States is being taken advantage of. And while he did say that he believes strongly in NATO, he wants a lot of those countries to pay more and to pay up what he believes their fair share should be. So he actually agreed that he'll be going to a meeting of the NATO members later this this year, and that's an argument that we expect him to take directly to them, that a lot of these countries that aren't meeting that 2% threshold that is part of the NATO charter, he's going to tell them that they need to pay up.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because of all the sort of pacts and treaties that Trump has talked about dissolving or reworking NATO. That 2% GDP contribution is one point that he's been pretty specific about. Tolu, on the defense spending part, I noticed there's one section there where he told the audience that he was going to bring them the best equipment, the best military technology, but he's also talked about how he wants to cut costs for some of these what he sees as being overly expensive programs. How does he marry the two?
Yeah, that's the argument that he's been making. He says that he's a deal maker, that he can not only increase the effectiveness of the military by getting them better equipment. He said that the military has been depleted over the years. Obviously, that's a big budget item, and it's a big line on the budget. Defense spending takes up a huge amount of our U.S. budget. But he says that the way he's going to do that is in part by negotiating with some of these defense contracting companies like Boeing, like Lockheed. He pointed to the F-35 contract, which is the largest contract that the military has had. And he says that he has worked to negotiate the prices down, and that's something that he's going to be doing in a very hands-on way, sort of working and trying to negotiate with some of these direct companies that have large U.S. contracts and telling them that they need to bring their prices down. So he's tried to sort of have both sides of the coin there, saying that he's going to increase the effectiveness of the military, get them better equipment, while also bringing down the prices of some of the war equipment that they use.
Tolu, let's look ahead now to what happens next for the president's immigration ban. Where are we in the timeline here for the Ninth Circuit Court of San Francisco to deal with the appeal that was made by the Justice Department?
Yeah, this ongoing battle seems to have a number of different deadlines. There's a 3 p.m. deadline for the Justice Department to make its latest filing in the case, where they can make their argument and say that this immigration ban is constitutional. Obviously, right now, the immigration ban has been put on hold by the judge in Washington. It looks like this is headed towards the Supreme Court because there have been conflicting rulings by different judges in different jurisdictions. And if this does go to the Supreme Court, we could see this play out over a number of weeks, a number of months potentially, with the ultimate decision to be made about whether or not the president has the authority to ban whole countries of people, and whether or not this is a violation of the Establishment Clause in the Constitution. So that's an argument that we're likely to see play out going forward.
Indeed, obviously a big story there that we'll continue to follow. Bloomberg's Tolu Olorunnipa reporting from the White House. Thanks so much for joining, Tolu. And U.S. markets close in 2 hours. Let's check on where stocks are trading with Julie Hyman.
Well, U.S. stocks, Oliver, are near the lows of the day now. All three major averages are lower. And even though the S&P 500 is not down that much in percentage terms, only a third of 1%, it is a pretty broad-based drop. If you look at all the groups in the S&P, we're seeing declines there among most, if not all of them. Now, as we're seeing selling in U.S. stocks, we have been seeing some buying of so-called haven assets. So gold, for example, is trading at a 2-month high today. We've been watching gold prices go up. And interesting piece out from Dave Wilson, who is with Bloomberg News. He drew on a note from Michael Hartnett, who's chief investment strategist at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. He basically says that gold is the tell for volatility. If you have rising gold prices and higher bond yields, that can foreshadow stock market slumps. So interesting perspective there as we see gold rise by 1%. And as for those bond yields, they're not necessarily cooperating with that scenario. Here we're seeing a drop in yields at the lows of the session, in fact, down 6 basis points at 2.41% today. So that's putting pressure, helping put pressure on groups like financials. We also still have earnings and earnings-related news to contend with. Tyson Foods actually came out with record earnings that beat estimates. However, the company also said that the Securities and Exchange Commission is investigating price-fixing allegations in the chicken industry and sent the company a subpoena. Cisco, another food-related company distributor in this case, that company's sales matching estimates, and it says its acquisition of a company called Brakes from Bain Capital will modestly hurt its earnings per share in the third quarter. So those two moving down. Also moving down today, drillers, oil drillers. As you can see, crude oil prices are moving down about 1.5%. We'll dig more into that in the commodity close in about 30 minutes. Chesapeake, Devon, and Transocean are also taking a hit. So this is the biggest declining group within the S&P 500 today. Scarlett?
Right, and we'll look into oil a little bit later on when commodity markets close at 2:30. Julie Hyman, thank you so much. Let's get you checking out on Bloomberg First Word News this afternoon. Emma Chandra has more from our newsroom. Emma?
Thank you, Scarlett. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says she will seek common ground wherever possible with President Donald Trump's administration. Merkel told reporters in Munich today that despite their differences over Mr. Trump's travel ban, she will look at each issue separately to see if there are places where the two countries can cooperate. French presidential candidate François Fillon says he has nothing to hide and that his wife's salary was, quote, perfectly justified. At a news conference in Paris today, Fillon said his wife worked as his parliamentary assistant for 15 years. The practice is legal, but he acknowledged that it is no longer seen as acceptable, and he apologized to voters. A French newspaper reported Penelope Fillon was paid $900,000 over 15 years. And New England Patriots quarterback Tom Brady did lose something at the Super Bowl, his jersey. After the game, the five-time Super Bowl champion and game MVP reportedly couldn't find his number 12 jersey in the locker room. Ken Golden, founder of New Jersey-based Golden Auctions, says since Brady is the most popular and collectible player in the NFL, bidding would start at $300,000 and could reach $500,000. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Emma Chandra. This is Bloomberg. Scarlett.
Thank you so much, Emma. Coming up, we'll be hearing from Henry McVeigh. He's head of global macro and asset allocation at KKR. He tells us which sectors he believes will be most impacted by moves to cut regulations. From New York, this is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Markets. I'm Scarlett Fu.
And I'm Oliver Rennick. KKR's 2017 global macro outlook is out, and it revolves around four main themes: the rise of fiscal policies, deregulation, domestic agendas, and a shift in volatility. On Bloomberg Daybreak America's Eric Schatzker sat down with Henry McVeigh, KKR's head of global macro and asset allocation, who described the current paradigm shift.
I think this is the first time in probably 15 or 20 years where we have an inflection point. And what we're trying to highlight is really a couple of things. One is we see a major shift from monetary to fiscal, which I think is a big deal. We've had all the central banks running the show. Now I think you're going to have government spending driving incremental growth. That's a big deal. It has implications for growth as well as rates and volatility. Second thing I would say is we're moving just globally. As you know, I travel all the time. The authorities with whom we speak, it feels like to me we're moving from global agendas to domestic. That has implications for trade in other parts of the world. The third thing, and I think you heard some of this last week, was we're moving back towards from re-regulation to deregulation, particularly as you think about energy, financial services, and I think healthcare will be in the mix at some point as well. And then I think you're moving towards a world where a lot of the volatility has been in the currency markets, really not in the equity markets. Equity market volatility has been periodically high, but generally on a sustained basis, most of the volatility has been in the currency markets as people wrestle with QE and devaluations of currencies. Our view at KKR is that's shifting more into the interest rate market this year and then probably over time into equities.
So people may look at those four, call them forces or themes that you believe are going to govern the macro environment and say, that sounds about right for the United States. Maybe it sounds a little bit right for the UK, where some of the same forces are already playing out with Brexit and a little bit of reflation. What about the rest of the world?
Look, I think this is what may be missed by many investors. I think there's been a lot of talk about Brexit, a lot of talk about President Trump. But if you think about China, I mean, based on our estimates, we think China's deficit right now is closer to 10 to 11%, not the 3% that's reported. It's a huge difference. If you take the first quarter of last year alone, they put $1 trillion of stimulus into the economy. You annualize that, it's about half of their GDP. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes where governments are trying to use fiscal to really get, I would say, some reflation. And so we've been in a period where we've had slow growth, monetary policy, disinflation, and that, in my mind, ended right after Brexit. And structurally, we think rates have bottomed. We think we're in more of a reflationary environment where governments are driving the outcomes. And look, that's going to create more volatility over time. We may not all be, economists, but I think people can understand Fed jargon more than they can potentially what's being said out of President Trump right now or Xi Jinping or Erdogan. I mean, if you look around the world right now politically, we've got a lot of strong men. We haven't seen this in quite some time. I mean, just go through the list: Abe, Xi Jinping, Trump, Erdogan. These are people, Modi. They all have very strong agendas where you're creating some nationalist, I'd say, fervor, and that's even before I get to the continent and what's going on in Europe.
That was Henry McVeigh, KKR, head of global macro and asset allocation.
Still ahead, the rise of robo-advisors. We'll be hearing from the co-founder and CEO of Wealthfront next on this topic. This is Bloomberg. Robo-advisors are gaining traction with investors. These are firms that use computers to build investment portfolios for a fraction of the price charged by traditional brokers. Carol Master and Corey Johnson of Bloomberg Radio are discussing this right now.
All right, Scarlett, thank you so much. We are listening to Bloomberg Radio. We welcome everybody on Bloomberg TV. And Corey, you've got a special guest in our San Francisco studio.
Yeah, that's right, Carol. Andy Ratcliffe joins us right now, the CEO of Wealthfront, founder of Wealthfront, co-founder of Wealthfront. An interesting development with Wealthfront in the last week where you guys have added, I think, a pretty significant new product to your business.
Well, we just introduced what we think is a revolutionary new approach to financial planning.
So you guys
if you can say revolutionary in financial planning.
Well, I think the robo-advisors are certainly that. And you see the discussion across the world of investing and financial planning, the concern about what robo-advisors mean, the super low fees that robo-advisors provide. But you guys are now with a new level of advice that you haven't had before. Why now?
Well, we're basically trying to deliver everything that you could traditionally get from a private wealth manager to the masses. So that's one of the things that differentiates us the most. And we're also trying to serve people who are under 40 and can't afford the minimums associated with traditional advisors. And those people don't want to talk to people. They want everything to come from something like this.
Right.
Hey, Andy, how many of the folks that are investing with you are under 30 at this point, and that's why you're kind of targeting them to maybe either make that audience a little bit bigger?
Well, we like to say under 40, not under 30, but I think 90% of our clients are under 50. We're really trying to focus on the people who have not traditionally had access to outstanding investment management and financial planning.
As you guys have all this product, you know, some of your competitors take a very different approach, right? And I'll lump them into two groups. There are the robo-advisors that provide human advice of some sort, or a level that which you can get to where you can actually talk to a person on the phone or sit down with someone. And then there are the firms out there that are offering something of a robo-like thing, but they've also always had these advisors. Why have you chosen to go against that notion of an actual human financial planner for your customers to meet with?
Because our target audience doesn't want to talk to someone. As a matter of fact, our clients actually say, we'd pay you not to talk to us. So this is a generational change. We're serving a generation that grew up digitally native, that prefers everything to be done through their phone. And so we try to deliver solutions that don't require anyone to talk to. Do you need to talk to someone with Amazon? Do you need to talk to someone with Airbnb? Do you need to talk to someone with Uber? No, but for some reason we think that you need to talk to someone in the financial services space.
Some investment advisors, Andy, might say this is a great thing. You're taking kind of maybe the emotion that comes out of advising or investing because people are just kind of going straight to the platform, making decisions. But at the same time, what stopgaps do you have for someone who might get a little bit nervous about their portfolio when emotion does start to play a factor?
You know, it's funny. I met a reporter about 4 years ago or so who said that the difference between what you do and what the traditional industry does is the traditional industry tries to sell you products that perhaps are not the best things for you. So they talk you onto the ledge. Therefore, they need to talk you off the ledge when things go poorly. Our clients believe in passive investing. They believe in index investing. And so since we didn't talk them onto the ledge, we don't have to talk them off the ledge. So you don't see the kind of withdrawals in down markets from our service that you do from a traditional advisor.
Well, that's interesting. It also seems that there's a kind of a perception out there that because your investors might skew younger, that their accounts are really, really small. But some of the numbers I've seen you guys present in the past suggest that you've actually got a lot of big accounts and they're not just a few people. Can you give me a sense of that?
Well, our largest unaffiliated account is, I think, over $16 million, but that's really not the target. We're really trying to find someone who's got between $100,000 and $1 million.
And how many of these people are in that sort of, let's call it $250,000 bucket?
Oh, God, I don't even know. We have over 100,000 clients. I haven't actually tracked the number that we have in that specific.
And where's AUM right now?
Over $5 billion.
That's amazing growth.
In 5 years, yeah. I think it's the fastest growing investment management firm of all time.
Andy, how competitive is it getting? You know, there's a story on the Bloomberg that just talks about how the top 4 U.S. players in the industry boosted their assets by almost 80% last year. 2 of them, Charles Schwab and Betterment, more than doubling what they hauled in, according to our data. How competitive, though, is it to kind of get at those investment dollars?
Well, for what we do, we actually find it to be less competitive. One of our competitors, who was traditionally software-only approach, just announced that they are going to add advisors. We think they're serving an older clientele. We are trying to serve people who are 40 and under. You know, that group that's the largest, I think, generation in our country's history. And collectively, they have about $7 trillion of investable assets. What we want to do is be the leading supplier to them, and we're seeing less and less competition for them as we build more and more products that are specific to them.
It's an interesting thing, too. I mean, Carol mentioned Schwab, so I'll use Schwab as an example. There are others out there. But for them to have a robo-advisor business just kind of keeps the assets under management at the same place, but it becomes a much worse business for them. I've got to imagine if you work at a place like that, the robo people are really struggling against the higher fee other people, right? So if you're making more fees in your left pocket, you don't really want to move the money to your right pocket, even if your clients are clamoring for a robo-advisor.
Well, you know, it's funny. I think that they have over $10 billion under management, but probably only on the order of $1 billion came from new clients. That's because it's not a very good experience for young people, who are the people who most want a software-based solution. We have a number of people in our client service group who used to work for Schwab, and they talked about how that was a big narrative inside the company, that they're obsoleting themselves.
Maybe further, let me continue with that, too. This notion of this obsolescence, I mean, there's been speculation sometimes that some of these companies might get actually taken over. Really quick, just a couple words. Do you see that as an eventual end for your business, where you've got some of these companies acquiring, the bigger financial service firms acquiring robo-advisors?
You know, before I got into this, I was a career...
That was Corey Johnson and Carol Master. And, of course, you can catch more of their radio interviews on SiriusXM, Bloomberg.com, and BBR Go on the Bloomberg.
All right, it's time now for the Bloomberg Business Flash. Look at some of the biggest business stories in the news right now. A proposed import tax by the Trump administration will deliver the sharpest blow to Jaguar Land Rover while favoring car makers like Ford. That's according to industry research firm Baum & Associates. A study by the firm finds Jaguar Land Rover, which imports all its vehicles, will need to raise prices as much as $17,000 to recoup higher costs. Ford, with significant domestic manufacturing, would need about $282. That's followed by General Motors with a hike of about $1,000. And Tyson Foods says it is under investigation by the SEC for its chicken pricing. The Arkansas-based company says it's cooperating with the probe. Tyson and its largest competitors have been named as defendants in a series of lawsuits that claim the chicken industry colluded beginning in 2008 to drive prices higher. The companies deny the allegations. JP Morgan Chase has been picked to replace Credit Suisse as corporate broker to WorldPay Group, one of the UK's 100 biggest companies, according to people with knowledge of the matter. The payment processing company may make an announcement on the decision as early as this week. WorldPay currently has a market value of $7 billion. And that's your Bloomberg Business Flash update. And we'll be taking a look at the commodities close here, looking at oil. That's up next. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg World Headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. This is Bloomberg Markets. I'm Scarlett Fu. Commodity markets are closing in New York. Julie Hyman is at the markets desk with a check of some movers. Jules?
So let's start with gold prices here, which are up 1% today. They're actually at the highest in 2 months. A couple of things contributing to gains. As investors are looking for stability or safety, what they perceive as safety, as we got some commentary out of Marine Le Pen, the French presidential candidate, who is saying that France should leave the Eurozone, leave the EU. And so that's spurring some of the buying that we're seeing in gold today. If you look at gold and how it has done since the election, we have it almost coming back from its losses. At one point, it was down as much as 11.5%. That was at the December lows, and now it's about 3.3% below the level where it was pre the election. Now, moving on to oil prices, we have been watching them as well today. We've seen declines here as we've seen the dollar. It looks like climb. It looks like that's the biggest effect here, down 1.5% at the moment at 53.05 the barrel. We, of course, have continued to see more supply come online, even as OPEC is constraining supply. Here in the U.S., more folks are pumping, as evidenced by the Baker Hughes oil and gas rig index. Now, I wanted to look at the 5-year chart here just to give some perspective. On the one hand, since we saw this index, the number of rigs in the U.S. for oil and gas, since we've seen it bottom last May, we've seen an increase of 325 rigs. That's about an 80% increase. However, there's still a lot of room for it to go higher. And one of the sort of items of uncertainty surrounding the Trump administration is just how favorable some of the administration's policies might be to the oil and gas industry and how much of a comeback we could see in oil and gas rigs. Also, we've been watching oil volatility. Interestingly here, we've spent a lot of time talking about stock volatility, right? But oil market volatility is also quite low. That's the white line here, even as the WTI price is in blue. And the gains that we have seen on the OPEC agreement have managed to be relatively sustained, and the drop in volatility has also been relatively sustained. Oliver?
Julie, thanks so much. Let's stay with oil. Vitol, the world's biggest independent oil trader, says prices are going to be volatile this year. Joining us with more on what's behind that call is Bloomberg Intelligence oil commodity strategist Mike McGlone. Mike, so we've got a prediction of volatility here. As we're just looking at Julie's chart, the oil VIX, OVX, is pretty low, though. So what are they saying is going to change here?
Well, the unique thing about oil lately is the oil volatility will go down as prices go up because the daily moves are about the same in terms of dollar amount, but that's a lower percent of the actual day. So let's say volatility, say oil moves $5 when oil's at $50, that's 10%. And when it moves $5 when it's at 100, or 10% when it's at 100, it's 5%. So right. That's one thing that's changing. And the market's kind of stuck in a range now versus last year it put in that low. And we all know it seems to be a bottom for a while.
So Oliver mentioned Vitol. Who are they, and why should we listen to them? Why does their opinion matter?
Well, as a key oil, key energy company. But for me, my main focus is what they said and what they mean. By volatility, that makes sense, and that range they put in makes a lot of sense, too, because that range, the top, around $62, $60 a barrel. In 2015, when the market was collapsing, it was stuck there for basically between May and June. So that's a key level, and we all know what happens if prices go up. Supply comes on, as we saw on the chart. There's more rig counts. And on the bottom, 52, maybe be a little bit high. I look more around 46 or so because that's kind of where things kind of bottomed last year after the election and after July and August.
So in their assessment, they say that they're going to see some bouncing around between $52, $62 a barrel for Brent. And they attribute it in partly, in fact, maybe more than part, to Trump. And they're saying that Donald Trump is going to sort of keep the market bouncing back and forth. But I thought we had OPEC. I thought we had global demand and growth that was fueling sort of the supply-demand equation for oil. What exactly could the administration do? Is it all about Keystone? Is it about expand? Like, what exactly is the Trump influence here?
Well, everything I see from the Trump administration should be somewhat negative for prices because more supply, drill at will, and it's really more focused on WTI US. Now, we're talking about Brent, so you can add like $2 for Brent, 62 versus WTI maybe around 60, but it's really not a positive factor. And I think the short term, the major issue has been OPEC. Now, OPEC's cut supply, but what has that done so far? There's all the incentives in the world to create more supply. But what I'm worried is what you're seeing in the markets, too, within the markets, is open interest in managed positions have reached record levels, which means the pendulum to the bullish side may have swung a little bit too far compared to almost a year ago. Is exactly the opposite when we put a bottom in.
Do you think that people are, I mean, it seems like people are surprised at how compliant OPEC and non-OPEC members have been so far in those production cuts. Do you think it's justified? I mean, just because they've been doing a good job so far, does it mean they'll hold to it even as oil prices continue to stay under pressure?
Yes, we've seen that before. What I usually like to do is try not to figure out these unknowns. Try to focus on more of the knowns. What's happened in the past based on market indications. And when positions get this too far swung, too bullish, too long, and the market's at a stretched level, you're supposed to be careful about being long. Just exactly the opposite of last year when it was on the lows.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's jump into my terminal real quick because you brought a chart with you that I think obviously it shows that positioning very well. So walk us through this. Basically on the bottom panel, we're looking at that positioning, which is the yellow line here, which is total open interest, just looking at WTI. And then you've also got the blue line, which shows you the net position, which is very long. And as you point out, here's where it was a year ago. It's taken off quite a bit. Is this a concerning chart to you?
I look at that as very concerning. If I wanted to enter a new long in crude oil, I would say be careful here, because that is managed money net positions. It's a total net longs and minus shorts. It's really biased to long. And if you look at the opposite a year ago, it was on the lows. That's when you were supposed to say, okay, thank you, the consensus is bearish, maybe I'll get a little bit more bullish. When the consensus is this bullish at the upper end of the range for the last 3 years and nearing resistance, you're probably supposed to be a little more careful.
And the bullishness is backed up by that open interest.
Yes, well, open interest will drive the market, but the key thing is the high risk of liquidation. So people liquidate when they don't get their, after a while. And every day that goes by, crude oil becomes less expensive to produce. And that's one negative thing for crude oil. Its technology is working against it.
All right. Bloomberg Intelligence commodity strategist Mike McGlone, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's get your check of the headlines on Bloomberg First Word News. Emma Chandra has more from our newsroom. Emma?
Thank you, Scarlett. President Trump was at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida today, where he got a briefing from military commanders at U.S. Central Command. Speaking after the meeting, Trump said he plans on making a big investment in the military and our veterans.
We will make a historic financial investment in the armed forces of the United States and show the entire world that America stands with those who stand in defense of freedom.
The president also said that he will, quote, load up MacDill Air Force Base with beautiful new planes and a lot of new equipment. In the UK, House of Commons Speaker John Bercow has announced that he intends to block President Donald Trump from addressing Parliament when he visits the UK later this year. It is customary for visiting presidents to address MPs and Lords in Westminster Hall when making a state visit. However, as Speaker, Bercow has the authority to block visiting figures from doing this. Russia has rejected President Trump's assertion that Iran is the world's #1 terrorist nation. Russia's foreign minister says Iran should be part of a proposed coalition to fight Islamic State. A Kremlin spokesman says Russia values its friendly relations with Iran. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Theresa May met with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu asked May to support new sanctions on Iran, saying Iran wants to destroy Israel. May said the UK is committed to a two-state solution for Israel and the Palestinians. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Emma Chandra. This is Bloomberg. Scarlett.
Thank you so much, Emma. Coming up, treasuries and gold are rising. Global stocks, meantime, are selling off as traders return to safe haven investments. Is this a sign the Trump rally is coming to an end, or at least taking a breather? From New York, this is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Markets. I'm Scarlett Fu.
And I'm Oliver Rennick. Harvard University professor Joseph Nye is considered one of the most influential scholars on American foreign policy. Earlier today, he joined Tom Keene and Francine Lacroix on Bloomberg Surveillance, and they asked him to compare today's discourse to the time after President George H.W. Bush was elected in the late 1980s.
Bush 41 was I think, a period where we had a very strong foreign policy and a very civil discourse. And I think that technology has hurt this somewhat in the sense that in 140 characters, people can be quite rude. And the rhetoric of the 2016 campaign was pretty rough. The question is whether politicians will find it in their advantage to keep that way, or whether the people will say, you know, we'd like to hear a little bit more listening, a little bit more politeness. So it's possible that the pendulum will swing back. On the other hand, technology is not in our favor.
Professor, what is your prescription for the newly minted Secretary of State, Mr. Tillerson? How should he act given the executiveness of the White House in its first 2 weeks?
Well, as I said on your program a couple of months ago, Tom, I think the Tillerson appointment is a good one. He knows what he's doing. He knows the world. He is going to have to deal with a White House which likes to act quickly, sometimes without carefully worked out consultations. And there is a long tradition of some tension between the State Department and the White House National Security Staff. Member Ronald Reagan ran through 6 NSC advisors. So I would expect we'll see a bit of friction there. I think the key for Tillerson is to keep a steady course on his own.
What about the friction within the GOP? Will the party, stay around and actually make sure that Donald Trump is in check, or will they rally behind him no matter what happens?
Well, I think in the short run, facing re-elections in 2018, a lot of the people who were critical of Donald Trump in 2016 are reluctant to abandon him. They think that they're going to be better off in their re-election if they stick with him. On the other hand, if part of what Donald Trump and Steve Bannon are doing is to try to organize a new populist party by appealing to the Tea Party Republicans and the so-called Reagan Democrats, then a lot of the middle-of-the-road Republicans or moderate conservative Republicans are going to feel that pressure. So the next 2 years is going to see a good deal of tension just under the surface.
And, Professor, what are the chances of a real trade war between the U.S. and China this year?
Well, I hope that calm voices will prevail. A trade war would be expensive for China, but it would be expensive for the United States as well. And if you're trying to provide jobs, it's worth remembering that our exports also provide jobs. So I think that it's a bad idea, but if you ask me to place a bet on will there be some, I would expect there will be some.
That was Harvard Kennedy School professor Joseph Nye on Bloomberg Surveillance.
It is time for the Bloomberg Business Flash. A look at some of the biggest business stories in the news right now. Uber has hired a 30-year NASA veteran as its director of aviation engineering. Mark Moore will work on a flying car initiative for the startup known as Uber Elevate. Moore's work at NASA inspired Google co-founder Larry Page, who secretly funded 2 Silicon Valley startups, Z-Aero and Kitty Hawk, to develop this technology. Uber isn't constructing a flying car yet, but will work to solve problems like noise pollution in the fledgling industry. Hasbro's decision to stick with Monopoly and other traditional games is paying off after a strong holiday season boosted the shares by the most in 16 years. The toy maker increased sales by 11% to more than $518 million last quarter. That, along with its Christmas season with the primary Disney Princess and Frozen license, helped Hasbro top analyst estimates for profit and sales. British companies are seeing their profits squeezed because of the drop in the pound. That's according to the British Chambers of Commerce. Now, according to the group, sterling's decline since Brexit is having a negative impact on domestic sales margins of almost half the businesses surveyed. As for the outlook on exports, that is mixed. And Bill Gross says investors must embrace what he calls the financial methadone of quantitative easing. The Janus Capital billionaire bond investor says that if the European Central Bank and Bank of Japan pull their support, markets would sink. Gross says these central banks are keeping interest rates artificially low. And that is our Business Flash update. All right, let's get you a check of how markets are trading right now with Abigail Doolittle. Abigail?
Hi there, Scarlett. Well, we're looking at a bit of a risk-off tone for the financial markets today. When we take a look at a multi-asset class board here, we see that the S&P 500 is trading down modestly, down about 0.3%. And we see that haven assets are trading higher, confirming the bit of sell-off that we are seeing in the growth year, more risk-on stocks. We have the dollar against the yen dropping. That tells us the safe haven yen is rallying. In fact, on the year, the yen is sharply higher, on pace for its best year since 2011, so a bit of a stealth under the radar screen haven bid there. We also have gold at session highs, up more than 1%. And of course, the 10-year yield is down 6 basis points, represented in green, telling us that haven bonds are rallying. So again, a bit of a risk-off tone. As for what's dragging the most on stocks today, the worst sector is energy. We do have oil trading lower by about 1.4%. Not surprisingly, some of the big E&P names are among the worst drags on the S&P 500, including Devon Energy, Apache, along with ConocoPhillips. And what really stands out here is the fact that energy was literally the best sector last year. So this year, we're now seeing a bit of a reversal. This is not necessarily new action. We have seen some weakness in energy once again today. So amid this risk-off tone, we do have lots of strategists on the street calling for a bit of a pullback. One of them is Ari Wald over at Oppenheimer. And we go into the Bloomberg and we take a look at hashtag BTV 5815. This is a one-year chart of the S&P 500 up top in white. Ari Wald, the head of technical analysis over at Oppenheimer, he's saying, and I should note Ari Wald has correctly been bullish for quite some time now, but he says he thinks that we are due a likely pullback. He's basing this on the fact that the RSI, or the Relative Strength Index, a momentum indicator for various securities, is starting to show bearish lower highs, indicated by that yellow arrow down. The last few times this has happened, I've marked it here, we see that the S&P 500 has gone sideways and, in fact, into a small pullback. So Ari Wald here may have a pretty good call. And it's worth noting, in fact, Goldman Sachs today, too, said that they see possibly a pullback or a pause in the Trump rally on a lack of economic catalysts around Trump right now. So lots of voices out there on the street talking about some sort of a near-term pullback, Oliver and Scarlett.
All right, Abigail, I like it. Always a fan of the RSI, my favorite technical indicator, my only technical indicator.
I was just going to say, how many technical indicators do you like?
One.
RSI. All right, coming up, in Brazil, advertisers are focusing more on the beer and less on the babes and bikinis. We'll tell you how the world's third biggest beer market is trying to whet the appetite of women. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Markets. I'm Oliver Rennick with Scarlett Fu.
And Oliver, while Budweiser's Super Bowl ads took on a somewhat political tone yesterday, beer companies in Brazil are also pivoting to reflect changing cultural tastes. Bottom line, it's now more beer and less bikini. Brazil's top 4 beer producers are toning down their ads and hoping to tap into a more gender-friendly wave. I sat down with Bloomberg's Brazilian reporter Fabiola Moura in today's Walk the Talk to explain why this is significant.
Here in Brazil, we are known for having a very sexist culture. For you to have an idea, in a poll last September, more than 40% of men said they think women somehow contribute when they're raped, which is really, very basic. So the fact that at least the beer producers are getting more conscious about using objectified women do seem to be a positive sign in a culture that's still tainted by the machismo.
Absolutely. Now, is the beer industry a leader in this regard, or is it behind the curve in the way that businesses in Brazil target or approach women?
Well, actually, the multinationals here are leading the way, and as part of that, Ambev is a leader in the sense that is not only being more gender-friendly, but also was the first one to sponsor the LGBT parade here in Brazil. I mean, among the big companies, they really have an active policy of supporting minorities and diversity. The same happens to other brands of beers, and I would say it was noticeable, this change in the beer market, though there are other areas like cosmetics and other sectors that also embraced a more gender-friendly marketing and advertisement.
What prompted this change to recognize that acknowledging female consumer sensibilities makes business sense? Did it happen suddenly, like a flip of the switch, or was it something that was evolving in this direction?
Yeah, it was a very gradual change, and it's still happening. So we started noticing less of the sexist advertisements, but there are still holdouts in general, especially in the beer market. You still see women wearing, swimsuits on the beach in situations that are not necessarily similar to, day-by-day situations in Brazil. For example, we're on the top of summer now, on the peak of summer, and it doesn't look like this, right? But it's been, I would say, for the last 10 years that slowly the advertisements became less sexist.
Okay. What does this say about the female buying power in Brazil?
Yeah, women are making more money, that's for sure. I think it's not only in Brazil, it's all over the world. But here, women are getting more represented also in society. So it's not just having more jobs, it's having more influential jobs and on higher levels. Though there's still a long way to go. The marketing normally notices these changes before other areas in a company. So that's the public they're trying to reach. For you to have an idea, there is a course here for beer sommeliers, and the participation of women in this course has increased 24% in the last 2 years. So it shows women are not only drinking more beer, but interested in drinking better beer. Which is, of course, a potential market for the beer makers.
Okay. That was my interview with Fabiola Moura of Bloomberg News.
Coming up in the next hour of Bloomberg Markets, interest in the French elections is coming into focus. We'll explain why there's so much attention on the race and what it means for the global markets. And on markets, let's take a look real quick to see what's happening today as we saw stocks kind of vacillating close to unchanged, but now about down 10 basis points in the Dow, a little bit more weakness in the S&P 500. Seeing some of the weakness in the trades that actually brought the market to a positive weekly gain on Friday. Financial companies and industrials have done pretty well on Friday. Financial companies are the best gain since the election, and we're seeing a little bit of softness in that group today. Then let's check out the dollar. A little bit of strength in the dollar, obviously down lower from its highs made in the past 6 months. So we're seeing a little bit of strength there today, as well as the 10-year yield moving up. So some weakness in the bond market as well. Perhaps that's affecting some of the moves in stocks and telecoms and utilities. This is Bloomberg. It is 3 p.m. in New York, 12 p.m. in San Francisco, and 8 p.m. in London. I'm Oliver Rennick.
And I'm Scarlett Fu. Welcome to Bloomberg Markets.
We are live from Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York for the next hour. Plus, we'll be covering stories in Los Angeles, London, and Washington. Here are the top stories we're following on the Bloomberg and from around the world. In markets, U.S. stocks take a cautious tone as we near the closing bell, moving lower on this Monday. Investors are making a bid for safety with treasuries, and gold is on the rise. And in business, we'll take a deeper look at financials as President Trump looks to roll back Dodd-Frank. Could we see even more upside for some shareholders? And in the C-suite, ahead of Disney's earnings this week, we'll discuss whether CEO Bob Iger could run the show longer than expected at Disney. And with 1 hour away from the close of trading, let's get a check on those markets. What's going on, Julie?
So we've got all three major averages trading lower here after sort of drifting sideways through much of the day. Now we've taken a leg lower in the past couple of hours here. And it's a pretty broad-based decline as well. If you take a look at the Bloomberg, you've got almost all of the groups within the S&P 500 on the IMAP that are lower. Tech is the one exception. It's now flat. It actually touched its highest since 2000 today, as we've seen some strength in large-cap technology. But otherwise, it's a little bit without rhyme or reason, at least if you look at the interest rate sensitive stocks as one example. We've got bond yields lower today, and yet real estate and telecom, which tend to benefit from yields falling, are not benefiting. Utilities is doing less worth. Financials are getting hit. So there's not necessarily a lot of logic to those moves. But I also want to take a look at what's going on with energy. As you saw there, energy stocks are the worst performing group in the S&P 500. Here's oil in white as we see it fall about 1.4% today, partially as we see the gain in the U.S. dollar. The Bloomberg dollar index hitting its highs of the session just after 10 a.m. At the same time, we saw oil making its lows of the session, although we haven't really necessarily seen as much of a tick-per-tick move for the rest of the day after that. Now, the exception within the energy complex and with energy stocks to that downdraft is with Cabot Oil and Gas, which is up almost 11%. This is after Williams Companies won U.S. approval to build its $3 billion Atlantic Sunrise natural gas pipe extension here in the Northeast. Cabot is one of the would-be shippers over that system, and so it's actually rising more than Williams in this particular case, interestingly enough. Other movers that we're watching on the top and the bottom of the S&P 500 include Hasbro, which touched a record today. That company, really interesting contrast with Mattel, which recently came out with earnings that disappointed. Barbie sales not doing well. Hasbro's Girl division doing very well, seeing more than 50% gain in revenue. Overall, the company saw an 11% gain in revenue. Its games business was also strong. On the flip side of that, we've got LabCorp of the Americas, and that's after a report late Friday from Reuters saying that the company could spend $8 billion to acquire competitor PPD. Analysts out today saying they don't think that that would necessarily be a positive deal for LabCorp. Oliver?
Julie Hyman, thank you so much.
Let's get your check of the headlines on Bloomberg First Word News this afternoon. Emma Chandra has more. Emma?
Thank you, Scarlett. President Trump was at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida today, where he got a briefing from military commanders at U.S. Central Command. Speaking after the meeting, President Trump said he supports the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, but wants allies to pay their fair share.
We strongly support NATO. We only ask that all of the NATO members make their full and proper financial contributions to the NATO alliance, which many of them have not been doing.
The president also warned that Islamic State is on a campaign of genocide and America will ultimately defeat the terrorists. Former secretaries of state and ex-CIA officials have entered the legal battle over President Trump's immigration order. According to the Washington Post, they've sent a statement to the appeals court hearing the case, arguing that the travel ban undermines national security and will endanger U.S. troops in the field. Among those signing it, former Secretary of State John Kerry and former CIA Director Leon Panetta. In France, far-right leader Marine Le Pen will take back control of the central bank and lead the country out of the euro